where business owners and their advisors get real, practical insight on how to build a team of advisors, maximize value, and exit on their own terms. I'm your host, Bob Tankesley, author of Exit Teams: Build a Team of Advisors for Your Business Sale to Get a Higher Price. You can find that book on Amazon. Just start typing in Exit Teams, and it should be the first hit. And don't forget to check out our content, all of our growing amount of content at exitteams.com. Whether you're years away from selling or thinking about an exit now, this episode is packed with must-know tips to help you take advantage of opportunities while avoiding costly mistakes. So let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by an expert in the world of executive coaching, my good friend, Mike O'Neill. Mike is an executive coach and founder of Bench Builders, a leadership development company, helping growing organizations build stronger leaders. With 25 years in senior HR leadership and executive coaching, Mike works with senior leaders who need a trusted advisor, not just a sounding board. Mike also hosts the Get Unstuck and On Target podcast with over 240 episodes. I'm envious, Mike, because we're sitting here to, I think, about number 20 for me. Mike, welcome to the show. This should be a great conversation. I know that owners and executives of middle market companies listening, I know they'll want to be paying attention.
Bob, it's good to be with you. You do a great job professionally. You write a great book. I have your book on my bookshelf, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, same here. You and I have talked often, quite a bit lately in a kind of a networking peer-to-peer advisory group that we both attend monthly, and I've really gotten to know and appreciate how you think about things, and I just couldn't wait to get you on the show. Um, just as a quick diversion, let's talk about your podcast for just a minute. You're over 240 episodes, it sounds like, on your podcast. Tell our audience a bit about that.
Well, the name of the podcast is Get Unstuck and On Target, and it is based on the assumption we all at some point get stuck. The typical listener are business owners who like to learn from others. So I invite guests on, and we, in a 30-minute conversation, uh, talk about what matters most to them, but we try to do it from the perspective of what would be most beneficial to the listener or viewer.
Got it. They can find that on all the usual podcast platforms.
Correct. And if one wants to go to it easily, just go to your browser, type unstuck.show, and it'll take you straight to the website that has that.
Got it. Cool. Unstuck.show. Hey, Mike, let's jump in. I know when business owners think about value, I've noticed this over the years. They tend to focus on the numbers. You can't blame them. The numbers are what they are. They're easy to see. They're factual, sitting right there in black and white. So as humans, as owners of companies, they tend to dwell on those facts and figures that shown up in financial statements and other types of reports. But let's face it, behind every number is a team that's executing, or in too many cases, failing to execute. Um, you've spent decades, it sounds like, I mean, 2.5 decades at least, in HR leadership and now coaching executives in this capacity. How much of a company's performance, I mean, at the end of the day, really comes down to leadership and people versus strategy and financials?
As I'm thinking about what you just asked, I automatically think of the financials first, but you can have a great strategy and you can have strong numbers, but you can still fail to execute if you don't have the right people. And in my experience, 70 to 80% of execution problems, they really can be traced back to leadership gaps. They're not necessarily strategy gaps. So the financials, I love them because they'll tell you what happened, but the people, they'll tell you whether it will happen again.
That's a great perspective. 70, 80%.
That's been
Um,
my
uh,
experience. Yeah.
yeah. So when a buyer It's been my experience over the deals I've done and tried to do that buyers go to the financial statements first. And you can't blame them. It's a great screening tool. It's a great way to say, nope, I don't like this one, don't like this one, don't like this one. Hey, wait a minute, this one looks promising. Let's dig in more on that. And I've always said for years that the financial statements, with my accounting background going back to 1991, what is that, 35 years? Goodness. Um, Financial statements are a report card on what management has done with shareholder resources. At the end of the day, I think that's what financial statements represent. And in a closely held company, management is are the owners and the owners are management in a lot of different cases. So when these buyers come along, they pick up a set of, 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 years worth of financial statements. Like you said, it's all in the rearview mirror. It's what's been done. It's what's been recorded, hopefully according to GAAP. Um, that on paper, as they thumb through it, they're looking at a story. They're looking at what management has done with their own resources. Again, in the case of a closely held company. And I could see your point of how 70 to 80% of what's in there is driven by what leadership did, what happened in the company from the top down. That's um, that's an amazing correlation. So there's room for improvement. If we want to know where to go to fix the financial statements, we could say, hey, 70 to 80% of the work is the people that you could be getting in front of to have these conversations with.
I think the way you describe it is right on target. That is, you can look at the numbers, but the numbers do not tell the whole story.
Yeah. Often the difference between a strong company and a struggling one, I know it shows up quickly when the owner, uh, often the leader, steps aside. And when you first engage with a leadership team, what are the early signs that the business has people or leadership issues that could impact its future value?
So the assumption we've looked at the numbers. Now we're going to kind of meet with the leadership team. Um, we all get in a room, but what I typically do is I kind of watch the owner first. If they answer every question before anyone else can, that usually is a red flag, at least in my book. But if I see that, the way I can validate that is I can just turn to the rest of the leadership team. And I'm going to ask them simple questions. It will be something like, who are you as a company? What are you trying to accomplish as a company? And how are you making progress? How are you tracking that progress towards that? If they look at you blanked eye or stumble, that tells me that there's probably not even a plan. And if they get through it, they may have a rudimentary understanding of what the plan is, but their people, you can be assured they don't. And if I can pick up on that, a buyer will too.
No, for sure. Um, so the first meeting as a group goes something like everybody's in a conference room, owner is sitting there, uh, the exec team around him or her, and you're watching, I imagine the eye movements, the body language. You're watching a lot of things in that live setting. I mean, as good as virtual is, a session like this, it doesn't capture everything. So you're in the room with them. Does the owner? Yeah, let me ask this way: how often does the owner have this kind of domineering presence? It's unspoken, but each exec in the room that reports to him or her has this. There's this unspoken. Um, we know who's in charge. We know what we can say. More importantly, we know what we can't say. Does that happen often?
Well, I don't want to sit here and describe myself as has been in lots and lots and lots of these conversations like you have. But what I would say to you is when when you're meeting with this leadership team, particularly for the first time, it's going to be awkward. Um, you just don't know exactly what's going to happen, and you everybody comes into meeting a little bit anxious, And when you're not quite sure, you're looking for taking your lead from. And oftentimes the founder, the senior person, asserts in that situation. But again, if they dominate, that's a problem. But at the same time, you're exactly right. The nature of the kind of work I do is you're making a best educated guess. You're watching this team interact and you're trying to get a sense of how do they function day in and day out, not when they're on their best behavior, such we would be in that room.
You're getting whether anyone says it or not, you're getting a feel for what the company's likely to operate as, or how it's likely to operate should that owner not be there.
Correct.
Is there, you know, the freedom to speak your mind? Is there the ability to say things that the owner might not want to hear? Yeah, is there ability to solve problems that don't all have to get run past the owner?
Well, Bob, I would say that though that first meeting, everybody's in the room, that's not really where the real information is found. It's when you leave that meeting, you're having one-on-one, or you're
Okay,
walking the plant floor and you're just interacting and you're just listening for, do they really know what they're doing? Do they understand the business? Do they know their people? That's where the real information comes in my book.
yeah. I was going to ask about that. That how much of what you learn about a culture comes through in these after the group meetings. I, and I suspected it was quite a bit more can be learned about the company than what is allowed to happen in that bubble there in that conference room.
Hmm.
Sometimes everything looks fine on the surface, but underneath things are just they're misaligned. They're a train wreck. Have you seen situations where a company looks strong, maybe on the surface, but the leadership team or the culture, it was actually pretty fragile?
Here's what I have found. Companies are real good at putting their best foot forward. People can put their best foot forward. So you can see strong financials and you look at collateral, it's polish. But those two things can be masking bigger issues, maybe even deep culture issues. Things like high turnover. When you ask about it, they just kind of explain it away. They're saying the right things in the meetings, but you can just tell they're doing something different in the hallway. And you can tell because you're observing it firsthand that they're not walking that talk. So, as I kind of look at it, your strong financials, they're going to kind of give everyone permission to kind of look away from those people problems. And my caution to anybody is that that is really what you're buying. You're buying the people who are staying after the sell. And buyers, when they get in the building, they'll figure that out. So if you're an owner, it's not, in my opinion, you're not putting on a performance. You're just, what I would hope is you put your best foot forward, but you also be open because savvy buyers, they'll figure it out.
100% agree. I every business I've taken to market and every buyer I've spoken with, and it's probably in the hundreds by now, they all, as quickly as they can, try to get their head around what happens to this business if something happens to this seller or any key people that might be leaving. And they all ask it in a different way, but very quickly they're trying to figure out, okay, I see the story on paper. It looks impressive enough for us to get through that filter and to want to have, more discovery. But the whole time they're trying to figure out, okay, we step in, we become the owners of this business, and owner one stays, owner two is gone, owner three is probably gone within a year. Um, Owner one may not be with us for very long. We don't know. It's open-ended. But these key people, either we believe in this story because we've heard enough viewpoint and we've made enough observations about the people that will be staying to get a comfortable feeling this is a business that can survive the ownership transition or it isn't. And it's that kind of, I mean, I used the term a couple of minutes ago about fragility. It's that kind of fragility that these buyers, especially sophisticated buyers, private equity, strategics, even family offices, they're trying very quickly to get a handle on that.
Yes.
What I mean, fragility, as I said, is it's easy to miss if you're only looking at financial statement performance or operational performance. But I got kind of a left field question here. What specifically tends to be misleading in those situations? What do you notice that a buyer is likely to notice? Boy, where they ask themselves, "Oh, I wish this company had cleaned up these personnel problems or these leadership issues before they had asked me to, step in as the new owner."
Well, I'm making the assumption we all have secrets. And the question really becomes of are the secrets substantive or not? I mentioned a few minutes ago, and that is a savvy buyer, they know what they're doing. But what they are also doing is they're validating what they're seeing on paper. They're validating what gets shared in that conference room, and they're validating it in real practical ways. And so what I would say is if there is an error, is people think that they've passed the test because they did real well in the conference room. In my book, the real test is when they do
Nice.
those walkthroughs on the plant floor or in the organization.
Maybe that's when the most is learned because that's when I just thought about it. That's when the guard comes down.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm out of the conference room
Hmm.
environment. That boy, that was high pressure. That was uncomfortable. And they're a little more not as reserved, a little more free with their thoughts about how the company really runs.
You mentioned in the intro, I spent quite a bit of time in corporate HR, and I've hired a lot of people over the years, including senior executives. And what I have found is we all go to role, even senior executives. And what I find is in an interview, the best way to set the stage on an interview is throw some of the rules out the window. And that is, I teach structured interview when we're working with first line supervisors on the importance of being consistent in your interviews. But I go a little bit off script when I'm talking about senior leaders. By that, what I'm trying to do is not trip them up. I'm trying to let them relax a little bit. What I really am looking for is the real person, not the polished because this is a potential buyer and this could be my new boss persona, but who are they? How are they? And anything I can do to kind of help break down some of those barriers to keep things conversational. There really is a method to the questions I ask, but it's a little bit, um, I kind of mask that, for lack of a better term, by keeping it conversational. I still get the answers I'm looking for, but the approach I take is a little, it usually is more productive.
Interesting. I could see that. I could see that. Yeah. So is it fair to say, I mean, whether the, well, let me back up because sometimes I can think faster than I can talk.
You and me,
Uh, what's that?
me too.
Yeah. Um, I often tell owners, wait until the company, if you can, wait until the company is optimized before going to market. Or if that's a bit of an extreme statement, wait until it's on the road, on the path
Mhm.
to becoming optimized. Knowing, what is optimized means many things to many people, and it's often a moving target. But if you progress towards something, it's better than than just standing still. Optimize to me means you're knocking out more problems that a sophisticated buyer would rather not see in a business than still existing. And even if you never sell your company, running an optimized business has all kinds of upside. I might have said this before in our group settings, and that's an optimized company. You can attract more capital on better terms. You can um, buy up weaker competitors. You can pivot and go into geographies or product and service lines that you might not have been able to. In your world, you can hire better people, retain them, pay them more, keep them, build all kinds of incentivization, is that a word? Programs for them to stay there and really enjoy and really contribute and really put everything they have into the company. And so is that part of your plan as well when you're working with a client is, hey, you may never sell, but let's let's do what we can to get you on the path toward optimization because if that offer that you just can't resist and it's an offer that holds true through some type of early negotiation process, it just looks like it would be silly for us to not sell. But are you having those thoughts in mind as well when you're working with leadership?
It's interesting. When I began working for a company, I'm not typically brought in because they're immediately planning a sale. But I find myself planting that seed early in the relationship. And by that, I mean, I begin asking the questions, what would an optimized company look like when it pertains to the people side of the business? What do we need to be doing that we're not doing? What do we need to stop doing that we are doing? And so what I guess I'd say to you is a better run company is better all around, even if you don't sell it. I thought that
Yep.
point was spot on. And it may open up options other than selling because you've got not only a well run company, but you got processes in place. Disciplined processes,
Mm,
people know what needs to be done, and therefore the strength of the business. Yes, it's important to have the right people, but maybe my bias is the strength of the business is do you have well-defined processes that are disciplined? And are those processes continually improved upon? If I am working with a leadership team that is not complacent, they're always looking for continuous improvement. That tells me that they have a little bit of hunger, that they always want to make things better, irrespective if the business may be sold or not. In most cases, there's only a small number of people in the room who get an immediate payoff with the sell. There's a lot of anxiety there. And what I'm trying to convey to them is if you know your business, you have processes in place, you got the right people and the right roles, that what the company is buying is you. What the company is buying are your processes. And if you're anxious about it, don't be. So I try to debunk anxieties, if that's the right term. And if the conversation is in advance, which it typically is, I'm encouraging owners to begin looking at this not weeks, not months, but literally years ahead of a likely sale.
yep.
Because what we're describing here is a very deliberate effort. And what I'm finding is companies are real good at taking care of the day to day. But when you begin suggesting to the founder, what are you doing to really ready this company for what's next? That's extra work. And therefore, you have to be intentional. And so, the kinds of things that I get involved with would be, developing your supervisors. My company, Bench Builders, we focus primarily on supervisory training. And the reason we do that is because most companies pride themselves in promoting from within, but then they just turn them loose. You got first line supervisors who are figuring it out on the fly. And lo and behold, they typically do. And then they get promoted and they get promoted. And the reality is they never learned those skills to begin with. So, one thing I enjoy seeing and encouraging companies to do is you're going to need to build your bench strength from the bottom and from the top. So, that's why the two things that we focus on supervisory training and executive coaching. I have in a number of clients the opportunity to work with first line supervisors and the C suite. And when you can get those two groups aligned, get out of their way. There's so
Wow.
much capacity.
It's like you're you come along and if you're brought in, you end up unlocking the potential that the individual people and the people collectively as groups didn't know they had.
Hmm.
That's I'm going to call that a superpower. I don't know about you, but we'll call that a superpower because that has significant bearing on the company's future. And if the company's going to get sold, or let's flip that coin. If the company's going to buy other entities as it grows, not just growing organically, but growing by leaps and bounds in the form of acquisitions, then what you have helped them develop internally can be applied to any company that they buy to the extent that there is a need for improvement there, and chances are there will be.
So, but I'm pretty clear with my biases. I do not bring to the table financial expertise. You do. But I mentioned earlier in the conversation, you can look at the finances, but then usually the next thing I look at is the strategy.
Yeah.
What is the plan there? So the strategy, do they have one? And when you asked earlier, when I come in, you might think that I'm coming in and asking the people questions first. I'm not. I'm asking strategy questions. What is your strategy? Explain it to me. Do people understand that strategy? How are you executing to that strategy? All of those answers will show up in your people issues. But I start with strategy.
No, that's again, I'll put it, I'll look at this through the lens of a buyer. I mean, that's something they're doing as well, at least the sophisticated ones. Um, I don't think I've asked you this question before. But when you were with corporate in a corporate environment, did you guys do acquisitions?
We did. And so most of my experience with acquisitions was we were buying competitors. We were buying companies that didn't have as strong numbers, didn't have as well thought out strategy, and didn't have the right leadership in place. And so we took advantage of that. It meant that we could acquire these companies and fold them in to our organization, knowing that we had strategies, we had processes,
Hmm.
and if it's the right people, we had a place for them. It might be in a different role, but what I would say is my involvement primarily was not so much the due diligence part as it was the onboarding. And we've not talked about this, and it's a little bit squishy to even bring up culture. But one of the things that I find most challenging is when you're marrying two companies, what are you doing from a culture standpoint? And so, what I would throw out to you if a company's being acquired, what I'm looking at is could I envision them fitting the culture that we're building? And if the answer is no, I would advise against.
The numbers may line up, may make sense on paper to do it, but this is going to be too big a stretch to pull these two culturally different entities together.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, how about we stay on this topic of value? You know, call it value creation versus value lost. From a again from an exit perspective, we talk a lot about exit here on the show. Buyers, I've noticed over the years. They're not just buying financial performance, they're buying a team that can sustain it. As I said, a few minutes ago, they're trying to figure out what remains when the ownership
Hmm.
isn't still present. So, uh, how does leadership strength or weakness show up in a evaluation or a diligence process? What have you noticed?
I name my business Bench Builders because I love sports. And I liken it not only in the sports arena, but also in business. And that is a team is only as strong as its bench. That's true in sports and that's true in business. But true bench strength means that you're developing leaders at every level, all the way from first line supervisors up to that C-suite. So I oftentimes kind of start with an honest question, and that is, what skills do we need and what are we building internally? And if we can't build internally, going outside. And so I guess what I would throw out to you is, do you have what you need to succeed? And oftentimes the answer is yes. There's people already in the organization that can fill that gap. But if they cannot, you have two choices. You train people to up to that gap, or you go outside to address that gap. So when I'm kind of looking at overall bench strength, what I'm looking for primarily are the gaps. Either gaps in the current way they're doing business, or what gaps do we anticipate if we were to buy this business?
I was thinking that as you were saying it, they have two options. We build something that gets better and we're focused and intentional about it, or we coast and we hope for the best later.
Yes.
You focus heavily, on building bench strength, which is, I think, a concept that many owners understand in theory, but I mean, let's face it, the data bears this out. They struggle to implement uh, building bench strength.
Hmm.
And when I say that, I mean, in my world, only about 20% of companies are ever taken to market, and only about 20% of those ever transact. So if you're listening, I'm holding up four fingers. That's 4% of companies ever get sold. And Mike, I say that stat two or three times a week, and I get re-shocked every time I say that. And I used to go back and forth. Where's the bigger opportunity? Is it the 80% that are never taken to market? Is the bigger opportunity there to increase the number of companies that get sold, or is the bigger opportunity in the 16% of all companies where an attempt was made to get it sold, but it just never crossed the finish line? And I've actually landed on the 16% because those were companies where enough people around the owner, people like me, attorneys, wealth managers, and CPAs, thought enough about this business to try to find another owner for it. They thought there was enough value there, there was enough uh, that some other future owner would appreciate. So I still maintain that. I came to that conclusion a long time ago that the 16% is where more companies can get sold if the focus is just on those. And I maintain that to this day. And I don't know if I'll ever uh, change that perspective. But you're convincing me here during this conversation that that number should be dramatically higher. That one out of five companies taken to market can't be all that there is. That percentage can be made higher if we get ahead of issues, if we solve problems on purpose, if we get, to use the name of your podcast, if we get unstuck, if we think differently, if we allow ourselves to start thinking differently. What is true? Getting back to this concept of bench strength, because I think I like that idea. That's where all this change can happen. What does true bench strength actually look like inside a company?
I would start at the very top, and that is if the founder, if the owner took a 2 week vacation to some remote place with little or no cell service, even if they didn't, the thought of what would break first?
Mm,
And if you have that answer, then you know what you need to begin working on. So, what I love about the premise of your book and this podcast is you're giving us the sobering statistic of there's a small percentage of companies that successfully sell. If you want to beat the odds, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves more so than you think you are to get ready. And that means having an exit team in place, having them ready, having processes. That's what you're very, very good at is pointing out that if you start early enough, you can make significant strides. And in doing so, you're going to increase the value of your business. And in doing that, you can have that much more pride in what you've built because it's worth that much more.
here we sit almost mid 2026, and my wife and I are actually we're thinking about what our next move might look like.
Mhm.
So naturally, you start thinking about, okay, what needs to be fixed up around our house? Not just fixed up. What have we ignored for a few years? What needs upgrading still even further? What would that future buyer want to see? And it's there's a very good parallel here with building your business for optimization for one day possibly selling it. And I'll take that a step further. Owners, if you're listening, don't just try to make improvements in your business that last year that you own it. You won't be able to enjoy it very long.
Mm.
You'll put it up for sale, and all those improvements and all that momentum you tried to build, you'll only get to see it happen for a brief period of time. In a similar way, my wife and I should not be making major upgrades only with the intention of selling it next year. Make those upgrades now and enjoy them for a few years and get to see something develop and become bigger. There's a great parallel here to getting a company ready for sale.
Yeah, I actually love that because we've had the same issue. We're looking at the house. What improvements do we want to make to the house? The first filter we look at is, well, what would improve resale value?
Yeah,
But if you have a choice to make between doing project A or project B, you've budgeted X amount. I'm trying to have the self-discipline to do the things that would mean we enjoy it that much more. For us, we just replaced a large deck on our house. Now, replacing a deck, will that increase resale? Perhaps. But here's what was happening. We weren't using the deck. Now we have a new deck. All of a sudden, we're spending more time on the deck. I forgot we even had a deck,
yeah,
but now it's right outside the window and we've begun using it. That parallel is true in business. Business owners sometimes lose sight of why they started the business to begin with. And they got so quickly mired down with
yep,
all of the stuff that goes into owning a business that they've lost sight that something attracted to them originally. Why wouldn't you invest in your own business and enjoy and maybe even experience some of the fruits of that effort um, in anticipation of a sale? And if it sells, then that just helps improve the value. But even if it doesn't, a better run business, here's the value. For an owner, it obviously increases their net worth, but a better run business means you have employees who are going home and they're talking to their spouses and the kids. And you step back as an owner and you realize, you know what? It's not just the employees. it's the employee families,
Families.
and
Yep.
it may be the community in which our business is based, is that you're building something as a business owner that can't necessarily be captured on a balance sheet. But what you're building is something that can, done right, be perpetuated beyond you. And when people begin to look at more of the long game, the things that you and I are talking about right now, it's work. It is work to invest in training your supervisors. It's work to really look at your leadership and see what do we need to do to kind of strengthen them. You know my bias, and that is coaching. I have benefited greatly from coaching. I have a coach myself. And the reason I have a coach is because I want to have confidence that I've got somebody in my corner who has my back. As a business owner, I'm a business owner. I also want to be able to be open and not feel like I have to mask. When you own a business, when you're in a senior leadership role, it's isolating. And in my experience, it is lonely. And the question is, I'm not suggesting you get a coach because you need somebody to talk to. That's not what I'm suggesting. That's a therapist or that's a counselor. That's not me. But as a coach, I am working with these owners, these senior leaders as a peer. And as a peer, I understand the challenges they have. I also know that it's my role to help them learn and grow. And it's not for me to tell them what to do, but it's to help them get clearer on what they want the business to accomplish. And if they have specific goals in mind, my job is to help them get there. So what you are seeing is when I am working with a founder, there's a lot of pride. Their name is above the door, but it's so much more than that. Why wouldn't you, if you're considered selling it, why wouldn't you go out on top? Not from a pure financial standpoint. That's great. But why wouldn't you leave it in a much better place because you came to the realization if I'm going to exit, I got to put the right people, the right processes in place well enough in advance to increase the likelihood that we are in that 4%.
I'm often asked, Bob, how long would you recommend that we, if I'm talking with an owner, that we, how long would you recommend that we take to improve our company, whatever the team around me plus the team internally, decides needs to be done first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and on. And my response has generally been about if you force me to give a number, it's 3 to 5 years. Um, I often say that because it accomplishes at least two things. At least 3 years accomplishes at least two things. One is um, you're making changes to the company that aren't going to burn out the owner or the executive team. You're not asking them to make changes for 10 years and we're just tired of this. But it's long enough to where they can hang in there. And we all know how quickly a year passes and 2 and 3 years. But the 3 to 5 year window also accomplishes another thing, and that's from the buyer's viewpoint, you've made changes that were in place long enough for the results of those changes to be sticky and likely to survive the ownership change. A lot of those changes have to do with areas that you could bring improvements to, and the leadership and from leadership down and the supervisory level up. Those things take time too. I mean that
Mhm.
can't happen, I would guess, in a year. Uh, Two, maybe three would be great. Four plus, yeah, we can do a lot of things, a lot of good solid change that won't burn out the ownership and management and will be provable to our buyer. A lot of this bench building I mean, the ultimate purpose of which is to build a business that can operate without constant owner involvement. How do you help leaders? This makes me think, how do you help leaders transition from being the driver of everything, um, as so many of them want to do, to become the team where they can build a team that can execute without them?
Hmm. When
Very difficult mind shift to make, I would imagine.
well, I think you know better than most. When you start a business, you've got to do everything. And over time, you realize you can't do it alone, so you hire people. And at least in my experience, what happens is you begin hiring people to do the things that are not strategic, they're tactical. Now, if we were being brutally honest, you hire people to do the things you don't like doing. Okay. However, what I have found is as businesses grow, the people at the top, there's still a strong sense of ownership.
Hmm.
There's a tendency to kind of hang on. And if they continue to hang on, you're devaluing your business. You have to develop the ability to let go. And the only way you're going to develop that is to be actively involved in picking the right people that you can delegate things to and giving them what they need to succeed. And letting go, particularly for a founder, is hard because you got two things going on at once, I think. You've probably got more than that. Is you're asking a senior leader to prepare for them to leave that which has defined them from a long time.
Hmm.
That's their identity. When they're at the grocery store, at church, if they're at conferences, wherever it might be, you're known as the founder of, the owner of, the president of. When that business sells successfully, that's great. All of a sudden, that goes away. So I would argue that there's another piece of that, and that is there needs to be intentionality to decide what, if I'm an owner, what am I going to do next? Because I don't know this to be true, but I would think one reason why people are hesitant to even come to you to begin with is they don't want to answer that question because it's a hard question. We have to begin thinking about our own mortality, and nobody wants to think about that. And what I would encourage people who are watching or who are listening to this, if you're in a key decision making role, the first thing I would ask is it possible that you are holding the business back?
Wow.
Is it possibly you're the bottleneck? And if you are, how can you systematically put the right processes, the right people in place that in letting go, what you do is you redirect your energies. You direct those energies into empowering these people, letting them learn and grow. And if you can do so and you begin stepping back, you realize you've started not only a business, but you're cultivating leaders. And if you redefine yourself less as the owner and more as I'm building a leadership team that can run this place without me.
Hmm.
If you could pull that off, I have complete confidence that Bob, when those people come in and do the valuations, that comes through loud and clear.
I like how you put it a few minutes ago. Um, I'll call it the vacation test. 2 weeks away, don't take any phone calls, don't answer any emails. What breaks first? And sit down before you get there. Sit down as a team and think about, plan out what is likely to break first. That to me, I bet would be a very worthwhile exercise. Okay, we think what's going to break first is this situation. If it's a high volume business or if it's a owner dependent relate set of owner dependent relationships with key customers, who internally can step in and fill the gap. Where has that set of relationships been? Who is that? set of relationships been handed off to? Is the owner too involved on the shop floor? Are they too involved in the hiring process? Whatever it looks like it's going to break first, fix that first.
Hmm.
Direct company resources and efforts and people toward fixing those things first. And just knock those out one by one. And over the course of a 6 months or a year, you end up with, well, even before the consultants come in, you end up with a company that's more likely to answer that buyer question of what happens when the owner leaves.
You know what I like about what you just described, Bob, is let's say you're an owner and you spend a year addressing what breaks first. You get that solved. What's next? What's next? Remember the premise. If I took a 2 weeks vacation, what would happen? If you spend that year thinking, I'm taking a 2 weeks vacation, lo and behold, what begins to happen is you kind of see, you know what? I've never taken a 2 weeks vacation. Might I even dream that I could do so? And because you've been through that over and over again, you begin to start getting a little bit of insight to what life afterwards might would look like. And I this may sound a little bit woo-woo for me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyhow. You probably know me, the people who are listening. I'm a pretty practical business coach. I don't really coach how to run the business, but I am a leadership coach, and I'm always looking for real practical things. The vast majority of the work that I do with my clients ties back to the business. But guess what happens? Other issues arise. They see that they want to become a better father, a better spouse, a better grandfather, or a grandmother. As they begin looking at, I want to do better there. Well, if they do, it means they have to figure out a way to invest in those relationships. If all your time and energy is tied up with the business, these other things don't happen. And so, what I dare encourage, particular clients I've been working with for a while, is I really ask them to start dreaming. What is
Oh, nice.
something you would like to do that you've never given serious thought to it? And it's really been interesting to hear what it was. It may not be grandiose things. It could be simple things, but it eluded them. When people can see that they, if they were to successfully sell their business, could pursue a lifelong dream that they thought was unobtainable, that changes the whole dynamic. That gives them the confidence to bring Bob in early, to roll up the sleeves, to do the things we're talking about, because you now have set your sight on long delayed dreams. And at least in my experience, many people don't even give time to that. And as a result, it changes the whole complexion of what we're talking about. And that is, you built something for a purpose, but life is more than just finding a business and selling a business.
Again, it's kind of early May of 2026. I just helped a friend sell his investment advisory firm, and we had discussions about this early. What does life for you look like after this is done? Knowing you're going to stay involved in some capacity for a year, two, three, four, who knows? The option is there for him to work, indefinitely. But post all of that, what does life look like for you? Well, I can tell you one thing, it's more time at the lake, or it's more time traveling, or my kids are starting to have grandkids, and so important for owners to get, as they're 3 to 5 years out, get them oriented toward allowing themselves to explore, I'll put it that way, what life post transaction looks like.
Mhm.
Happens every time. I have not, I'm trying to think real quickly of all the closings, the business closings I've been to, owner in the room, buyer in the room, or maybe it's virtual. I have not done one yet where the owner did not either shed some tears or, in the case of a guy, visibly hold back his emotions as to what this event he was going through that day really represented.
Hmm.
To your point earlier, that some too often the business is the owner and the owner is the business, and they're inseparable. And oh my goodness, this is the day when it all comes crashing down. But to your point just now, let's put some thought into this ahead of time because maybe there's bigger and better for you later. Um, this makes me think about business value being transferable and how the business needs to not be so personality driven. What is I use this term transferable business value, but let's use a variation of that now. From where you sit, what does transferable leadership structure actually look like?
Yeah, I may have already kind of hinted at that earlier in this conversation, but um, I go back to processes, and that is leadership effectiveness is really only as strong as those repeatable, proven processes that are kind of
Mm,
behind that. And if you have those processes and you involve your entire team in continually refine the processes, the the people piece falls into place. And so if you have the right processes, you are going to be much easier to align the people who can lead those given processes. And so that sounds a bit academic, but what I would ask is there a best way to do certain thing? And if there's agreement, basically say that's our process. And if that is our process, how do we make sure that it doesn't go astray? That's part of the process. And that is the discipline to make sure we're doing so in a consistent way. That will show up in so many different ways. A quality product or higher quality service. If you have processes in place that you're continually improving upon, then what I would say is that's the biggest leadership challenge. And that is asking those leaders to help articulate and manage processes. Because if you do that, your company is less dependent on the people and it's much more on the process. And I'm not in any way diminishing the importance of leaders. But what I would say is if you have those processes in place that they're kind of battle tested, then as you're looking at your bench and you're looking at who can the buyers count on to be here a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now, it means that there's been dialogue well in advance.
yeah.
They they're not going to have the payday that the owner is going to have, but they may own processes. They may see opportunities for long-term growth. And so you kind of have to be mindful of when you walk away as the seller of the business, who are you leaving behind and how are you leaving them? And if you feel like you're leaving a little bit of a lurch, fix that now.
No, that was well said. There's a lot of good nuggets, a lot to unpack there. I think we'll turn that the past couple of minutes into one of these shorts as they call them, and put that on LinkedIn. You're making me think too about what you're building by documenting and well creating processes and documenting those and making sure that all the right people in the organization know what the processes are. You're building toward like an owner's manual that you can give to the buyer. Here's how this business works. Not here's how this TV works or this computer or this piece of yard equipment or whatever. Here's how this business works. Here is your owner's manual, and we've taken the time to show you why it still works, why it's going to still work when the owner's gone. You can tell me one thing, but showing me, I'm going to believe it even more so.
And Bob, I don't know if this is something you've seen, but if the question is about, quote, something, explain how this works. If what comes out of the mouth is, oh, well, Tom's responsible for that, or Susie, she's got that part. What that says to me is
Mhm.
they are the ones doing it. The process is the person. If the process is in place minus the person, that's when real value appears in my book.
It's like, do you really want information to be siloed in people that could leave?
Hmm.
People who might say, I'm out of here, as soon as they get wind of a deal. Or there may be no deal imminent. I'm out of here because I don't like being appreciated, or whatever their situation is, whatever causes them to leave. The company creates an enormous vacuum of knowledge. Buyers are terrified of that. I
Yes.
get it. Mike, as we round third and head past home, or head to home rather, um, we've got a section here called Rapid Fire that the audience seems to like. I ask questions, and then in kind of a really quick format, and then you come back with your best thinking on it. All right.
I'll try.
Biggest leadership red flag in a business.
That the person at the top is the bottleneck.
Hmm, that's a good one. The most underrated driver of team performance. I like that one.
Clarity. That is, do people know the plan? And are you making sure the team has everything they need to execute to the plan?
Okay, that's good. Well, we always like to ask this question. One thing every owner should fix this year.
I think we spent quite a bit of time on this. I think the quote exercise of I'm scheduling a 2 week vacation. If they would do that, I think it would open everybody's eyes to things that can be acted on.
I know this is rapid fire, but I just got to take an aside here. I've got a business. I've known the guy for a long time. He loves the beach. Love to spend time at the beach, second home. Um, he cannot detach as much as he loves it, and it's 6, 7 hours away. He just can't detach, and I keep trying to tell him, you might be selling someday. I get it. Your son has come in, but what if you guys collectively decide that this business is better in the hands of somebody else, which would be the ultimate, altruistic motive. You guys have only taken it so far. Let somebody else see how far they can take it. And that's not been a question I've been able to get him to answer yet. All right, next one. What builds strong leadership the fastest?
Trust,
Pardon?
trust.
Trust. Foundation for everything, isn't it? Okay, what breaks a leadership team the fastest? Lack of trust?
Lack of trust that results in silos.
Yeah, yeah. Power grabs and
Mhm.
empire creation and, yeah, turf defense. Yeah. Well, most owners don't realize how important leadership structure is until they're already under pressure. It's human nature. I get it. Um, Last question I can think of. If you could sit down with a business owner 3 years before they sell, what would you tell them to do? What would you tell them to do differently when it comes to their team and their leadership?
I would probably reinforce what you've have said several times during this conversation. Don't wait. That the biggest mistake that we can make is know that what we got to do. We've got to build our bench. We got to have disciplined processes, but we keep putting it off because of the daily fires. Don't wait. Start building what you know has to be built. The processes, the right people in the right roles. because what we're describing, it does take longer than you think. So don't wait because the culture will also have to change and there will be resistance to that. And so I go back, this is the third time I said it in this response. Don't wait. The trust for this to work will take a while to develop. It's not going to happen overnight, but start now.
Well said. Very well said. Mike, this has been awesome. Um, I mean that. I think this will be one of those more often replayed episodes of the show. Where can folks get a hold of you to learn more about all this good work that you do for middle market companies?
Probably the easiest, just go to our Bench Builders website. It's real simple, bench-builders.com. My name's Mike O'Neill. I'm on LinkedIn. I enjoy interacting on LinkedIn. I typically post most weekdays. And part of those posts is the podcast. So if you'd like to learn more about that podcast and learn from really smart people like Bob, because Bob was a guest on the podcast, go to unstuck.show.
That's why I had you on this one, not just to return the favor, but I like having smart people on the show as well. Thanks, Mike. Well, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Exit Teams podcast. A huge thank you to my guest, Mike O'Neill, for sharing his decades of experience and insights. So, if you're interested in understanding how excellent executive teams can function, I suggest you reach out to Mike, see how he can help. If you're a business owner thinking about your next chapter, now is the time to start building your advisory team. You can learn more in my book, Exit Teams: Build a Team of Advisors for Your Business Sale to Get a Higher Price, available on Amazon. And don't forget to visit exitteams.com for free resources, tools, and insights that can help you prepare for a successful exit. Until next time, build your team, sell smart, and take control of your future.